I'm ABC15 Chief Investigator Dave Biscobing. Thanks for joining us on this exclusive streaming discussion. We're here to talk about our newest investigation called Seeking Death. I'm here with my co-reporter on this. She's an investigative reporter with ProPublica. So Nicole, this story, I guess, we've been working on it for like 6 months now.
Yeah.
And I still think every time we talk on the phone about it, I feel like we're still kind of in awe every time about how hard it is to get information. I mean, do you feel like, I know I feel like it, it's just, I'm still stunned that when we're dealing about what we're talking about here, which is death penalty cases, life and death matters, how do we choose who should live and who should die, that we can't get even the most basic information? What was that process? What's that kind of been like for you since the beginning?
I mean, it's definitely been surprising because it is really it's the biggest kind of decision that we place in an elected official's hands. I mean, the power to seek death and the fact that we don't have a precise accounting of, even just how many times they're seeking death, the outcomes, the case costs, like the fact that that is just so hard to get to and has taken us months to even kind of pierce that secrecy is sort of stunning.
It was, I remember when we kind of first started talking about this, and it was like this discussion, like, okay, what do we know? And then we started making calls to people in the death penalty system, like, defense attorneys and experts, and they're like, well, we don't know anything either. We're like, well, who does know this? And
Yeah.
so, to give a little background to the people that are watching this, our series really is about the Maricopa County Attorney's Office, and they're one of the capitals of capital punishment. Historically, one of the top 3, 4, 5 in the country for seeking death, getting death sentences. I mean, it's happened hundreds of times, we found, in the last 20 years. And I guess the most crazy part of this is we can't even get a clear answer about how many times and how many cases they've sought death. Like, we can't even get like an accurate starting point, which is nuts to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting that there's been so little attention on kind of that beginning process. So those initial decisions that prosecutors make. I mean, there's information about like death sentences, there's information about the end of the process, but uh, there's really not a lot of focus on just kind of how this happens, how long it takes, etc.
I mean, yeah, there's actually a lot of research and a lot out there about the outcomes, but
Yeah.
no one's looking at the very beginning of the process that sets the entire legal system on this years, sometimes decades long path that's costing, well, what we found is hundreds of millions of
Hundreds of millions
dollars.
of dollars.
And, it's just nuts. So to kind of give a little bit of the people watching some idea of what we're talking about here, the Maricopa County Attorney's Office, right? They have a special committee that helps the county attorneys decide, what cases should be death penalty cases. And we found that committee's pretty much entirely secret. And by that, we mean literally, like, this is their policies. The composition of the committee is entirely redacted. They don't want you to know who sits around and helps the county attorney decide who they should try to kill or not. And then they meet sometimes, usually about twice a month, and they review cases. They won't tell you what cases they reviewed. They won't tell you what defendants they looked at. They won't tell you who's prosecuting it. And their decisions, they're just entirely blacked out. And so we got 20 years of their records. I mean, we got 20 years of pages. I mean, it really just shows a lot of
20 years of pages, yes.
20 years of redactions, I guess you
Yeah.
could say. I mean, by 20 years of redactions, I mean, we mean it. I mean, it's just, here, we'll just give them a little bit of a reference here. Just, here, maybe this is the better way to do it. It's not really here we go. Just tons of black boxes. And, like, I guess one of the things that we've been asking a lot of people is some of the information they're redacting is clearly public record. I mean, like case numbers,
Defendant names, those are things that are public record, should be public record. And the other thing is that, we also got a lot of court records too.
Yeah.
So, like, in order to kind of figure out how they make these decisions and the outcomes of these decisions, we used a bunch of public records to kind of show how successful they are, right?
or not successful, I
Or
guess.
unsuccessful.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, and that's the kind of the thing is that this is we spoke to a former county attorney, the county attorney who a couple decades ago created this
Created
committee.
it, yeah.
And he doesn't like how secretive this is. He's like, I don't like what my office has done with this. And he doesn't think almost any of this that's been redacted should be redacted. He believes just about all of this should be public because it is technically public information. But I guess the county attorney's office argues in this kind of format it's not. But we, like you were kind of discussing, we found some workarounds, right? So we went to the court and they had a list, not maybe the most accurately kept, but a list of all of a list of capital cases that had been assigned in court, death penalty cases. And so by using that, we were kind of able to recreate this, or at least know what cases, or at least almost all of them, that they sought death in. And what was the number? Like we're at like almost 350.
Nearly 350, but we didn't count, the pending cases in like the final analysis. So
Right.
we did look at nearly 350
50
cases.
cases,
It was
right.
346, if I'm
Right. That cases
remembering
that
correctly.
have been filed for cases that started in 2004 to 2023. So we did a 20-year look, and I mean, surprising to us, out of those 346 cases, about just under 320 have been completed or resolved at the trial level, and just 41 death sentences out of more than 300 cases. I mean, that's like 13% only.
13%,
Yeah.
yeah. So when prosecutors make this initial decision to seek death, it's really only working out in 13% of the time, which is kind of low.
I mean, it's when you consider the fact that they have sought death in hundreds of cases over the last 20 years, and only 41 have gotten to death sentence. You're talking about hundreds of cases then that didn't get there, where we've had to, as taxpayers, expend a ton of time, resources, money, taxpayer money on these cases. And it's maybe too simple of a way to ask the question or look at it, but it's almost like, was all of that for nothing, right? Or it really should why isn't there more focus on the upfront decision making, and why should it be so secretive considering the ramifications of those decisions? I guess that's why when you and I look at these records and all this secrecy, it's like these are 7-figure, years-long decisions they're making.
Yeah, they're seven-figure decisions, and once prosecutors decide to seek the death penalty, it basically changes the entire game for the rest of the proceedings, right? Like you have two defense attorneys, you've got a mitigation specialist, you've got what else? You have one more thing too.
And a private investigator.
Private investigator, yeah.
Yeah, your defense team, it goes from just one attorney,
Yeah.
Public defender on a regular murder case, to four
To a whole team.
for a death case. And it's not just one trial. It's essentially like three. I mean, there's one main trial, guilt, innocence. Then there's a kind of a smaller phase called the aggravation phase, determining whether, okay, is this actually a death eligible case, or enough aggravating factors? And then there's actually another pretty significant trial, the penalty phase trial, which can go weeks sometimes. And, it's just this stuff. We've seen these trials go on for months.
So not only is that a financial investment, it's also an investment of the public's time, right? In the form of juries, also the court system, judges, all of the people that kind of make a courtroom work. It's a super intensive.
It is, and the cases tend to go much longer. I mean, we sort of seeing some cases still not resolved after 10 years, and that's only just to get to an initial verdict. That doesn't count the decades of often appeals that exist in these death cases. And even though it's not something we're focusing on specifically in this reporting, I mean, there are people on death row in Arizona going back to the late 80s, early 90s. So, I mean, just because you get a death sentence it's actually one of the least likely outcomes from a death sentence is an execution. Right.
Yeah.
They're more often likely to get studies have shown you're more likely to have a death sentence overturned, or the person to die in prison before they're executed, than actually get to execute them, which is another question about, isn't it about if the death penalty is right or wrong? It's if it's really kind of worth it, and then why it's so important to look at whether our prosecutors are making the right decisions in the right cases.
Yeah, especially in a place like Arizona, where there's been kind of a long history of questions surrounding the Maricopa County Attorney's Office with their sort of discretion. We've had Andrew Thomas. We have, even more recently, we've had some controversy
Hmm.
surrounding the office and kind of the decisions that they make. And so it really does beg the question, like, are we alleging death appropriately?
I mean, yeah, you talk about Andrew Thomas, who was seeking death at a rate pretty much higher than any other major county in the country during his reign. It got us to over like 130 some pending death cases at his
Hmm.
peak during his tenure in the mid 2000s. More recently, we've had the county attorney's office hire a capital judge who's under judicial investigation for some pretty concerning misconduct, and they stand by that decision. And they hired that judge to prosecute. They hired a death penalty judge to now prosecute death penalty cases, which
Hmm.
there's a whole bunch of conflict issues that have been brought up about that. And then the office as a whole at a high level, they kind of co-signed or didn't really do their due diligence and let their prosecutors falsely charge protesters as gang members. I mean, everybody at the top of the office knew about the plan. They let it go, and it cost taxpayers $6 million
More.
in a
Yeah.
settlement just a few months ago. So, you know, there's a lot of, we'll say, there maybe not be the benefit of the doubt they think they should have when it comes to making such high level decisions in public, just given the office's history. And I think one of the things I think is interesting, and we'll maybe give a little viewers a little inside look at this, is so this is the Capitol Review Committee policies, right? Like we said earlier, they redact or they black out who sits on the committee. But when we were pressing for answers through the process, well, I'm actually going too far. Defense attorneys and the ACLU as well have like sued to try to get this kind of information.
It has been well litigated.
Yes, and so the county attorney's office has fought very hard for very long to keep this kind of information a secret. Yet we asked for records, and they did black it out when we initially had gotten it a couple years ago, and then recently when we were relooking at this to put this series together. And but as we were pressing for answers just in the last week or two, they gave us, I think inadvertently, they won't admit to that, but they gave us an unredacted copy. I don't have it here. But what they were keeping secret is just some position names. So it's like
Yeah.
we've spent a ton of money to keep what should be very public information, it would seem like, or many people would argue to be public information, a secret. And it's like they've spent a lot of money defending that too, and resources. So I don't know. It's almost like I remember I called you when we found out about that, and I'm like, wait, was this an accident, or we should have gotten it? And then when you actually see what's on there, you're like, this was it. I mean,
Yeah, it's definitely just like, oh, this is who you would expect to be on the committee.
basically an executive staff.
Yeah, exactly. It's like bureau chiefs, etc. And then we were told that that was an outdated copy of the policy, right?
Which we're not necessarily sure that's true, because we had asked for the most recent copies of the policy this year, and I think a few months ago they sent us it. It was the same one as the one they sent unredacted. So, I mean, we requested for the new one. I don't think it should take too long to get back, but we'll see. But it was up to date as of a few months ago, according to the records division. So
Yeah, I think another really interesting thing with our reporting has been our chats with like former jurors who have served on capital cases and delivered verdicts, and just kind of what was surprising to me was the toll that it took on individuals. Not only the time spent in court, but the emotional toll. Was that surprising to you?
yeah, it was. I mean, so just so when people see this and if they want to check out our work, we just didn't go and interview experts, and we really tried to get at the real impact, the people who are jurors, the victims' families, the people who have to live with the consequence of these decisions. And I think I was surprised in a couple different ways, to hear jurors talk about how rough this really is on them. I mean, we talked to a few of them, and they told us, and you'll see if you watch the series, they had to put their lives on hold for months, and they hear these horrible things, and they're the ones that ultimately have to take on the responsibility of the decision that this secret committee puts on them.
A life or death decision, right?
Yes. And I think what really surprised us is that juries reject death a lot more than we or anybody else really would have predicted. It's almost half the time. I mean, like, you give jury a decision on whether or not to kill her or give someone life, and it's almost a coin flip. Yeah. I mean, and that was kind of stunning. I mean, even like some experts in fencers, like I didn't really realize it was that
Yeah.
point. But that's one of the things I think was one of the most shocking findings. We found cases where you'd be like, okay, this person killed a police officer.
Yeah.
They're definitely going to get the death sentence. And the juries are like, no, they have mental illness. They have intellectual disability, the trauma in their life. Yes, they should go away for life, but can't do it. I can't kill this person.
Yeah. So the mitigating factors really kind of made an impression.
It really made us kind of realize that, I mean, for lack of a better term, it's a lot of this is a crapshoot. I mean, prosecutors may think they have one that's airtight, and you look at some of these and go, well, that's definitely going to be one, and it's not. Then there are other cases where they even try twice because you get two shots at the penalty phase. So if you get a mistrial the first time, you get to try it again, only twice. But like Jodi Arias, for example, they failed twice. They had a mistrial each time because several jurors in the first penalty trial said, nope, can't kill her. I don't think it's death worthy. And then the second time there was at least one holdout who was like, nope, same thing. And so, God, there's, I forget the figures on that one. I think they estimated it was at least 3-4 million
At
for
least
that
3
case.
million, yeah, on that case. Yeah, definitely a huge expense.
I mean, that's what just the defense budgets now, they say, for their new cases. They said, okay, well, this is gonna be every time it's deaths, 2-3 million. You know, that's gonna be what a capital case costs us. And again, that's not appeals, that's not prosecution costs.
Yeah, it's just the trial
It's
level,
not court costs,
which
just
we didn't
defense.
even focus on post conviction
No,
level.
no, there the defense appeal process is long and expensive, and it kind of restarts at a couple different steps. So it's not like, there's a state, there's a local level kind of appeal, and then there's a state level kind of appeal, and then there's a federal habeas process, and especially at the federal level, it's kind of like a restarting. Like they go through everything. There's like a whole new kind of defense investigation that takes place. So it's an expensive thing, and we're not quite content yet with the fact that we didn't get all the costs like we wanted, and so that's going to be the focus of some future reporting, because the county attorney's office, for example, has not been able to provide us figures for how much capital cases cost them. I mean, granted, they might have different, they told us it was the response was something, we're unlike a private law firm, we don't keep case by case.
They don't track it case by case.
But I mean, just for like we asked for what the capital unit might cost. We asked more generally, okay, what a capital case cost you? Salaries or expenditures, and we haven't even been able to get figures for that. But you would imagine we'd probably be looking at, tens of millions more over the course of what we're looking at a minimum. But we don't know, because that's also a secret at this point.
Yeah, definitely.
One of the things I think is also, when we talk about the real people and we focus on this, was kind of surprising to see that there are cases where the victims' families either didn't want death or did want death, but then through the process, like, we can't take this anymore, please stop. And prosecutors told them, no, we're going forward. And it's like, and that raises the question, should the taxpayers be paying to put someone to death if the victim's family doesn't even find that to be justice? And I guess, we can't I understand the argument that we can't let victims' families dictate everything that happens.
Yeah. Right.
But when you talk about some of these cases, I mean, it's a legitimate kind of discussion to have. I mean, it was Sherry Spooney that we met out at the cemetery, and they had that really unique situation where they're on both sides of the fence.
Yeah.
What did you take away from
victim's family and defendant's family, as Octavia Rogers was accused of killing her 3 children. But I think the thing about that is, and Sherry Spooney, put it so well, who is this justice for? The Maricopa County Attorney's Office is seeking death in the public's name, but who is that justice for?
Yeah, a mother who has a mental break and commits, an incomprehensible crime, kills her 3 kids and then tries to kill herself. You can see her mugshot. It's pretty grotesque. She has a slit across her throat, but she survives. And so they seek to do the death penalty. But the family, who's, both family to the children who have been killed and family to the woman who is now facing, charges and death, they're like, she's going to go away either to a psychiatric facility or a prison forever. Like, what does seeking death, that was their question. Who does this benefit?
Yeah.
Right. Like, she's not someone who waged war on the public, right? This was a horrible domestic situation. but what larger purpose does that serve? And that case went 7.5 years
Yeah.
before a judge had to finally determine she's guilty except insane. Like, we can't legally
Can't go
put her to
forward.
death.
Yeah, you actually can't.
And, what was it that
So it wasn't even about prosecutors relenting and saying, hey, you know what? Let's not move forward with this. This is about actually like the legal standard. Like they can't put someone to death if you did not know at the time of the crime what you were doing.
Right. And that's, severe mental illness is one of those factors
Yeah.
that weighs in. And then also mental, kind of intellectual competency,
Yeah.
intellectual disability. So if your IQ is too low, you don't often meet a threshold where you're eligible for death, but that's been an issue in a lot of
Yeah.
cases too. There's been some death sentences overturned here and across the country because of that. So I guess, kind of as we close here, what do you think are some of the big takeaways people are going to get from our reporting?
I've been asking myself this question, and I think, just is this worth it? And I'm hoping that we're shining a light into that question. Are we doing this in the appropriate way? What about you?
I think it's that. I think it's that what we've looked into is something that's rarely looked into. There really hasn't been a look at this here in at least a couple decades in the way that we're doing it, and very few places across the country. I mean, it was very hard to find comparisons,
Yeah.
right? I mean, we got some little like snapshots from some other places we could compare, but nothing where it's like, okay, this is how many times a place has sought death. This is how many times it actually got to the finish line. And I guess we should say, of all the cases that have started in the last 20 years, 0 have ended in execution. So again, that just shows
Yeah.
you, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's been no cases that started in 2024 that have been executed yet. So just
Yeah.
that's the kind of time frame we're looking at here, at least 20 years when they make these decisions. But I think people are going to see some facts, figures, but also hear stories from people on an issue that really hasn't made itself kind of into the public square, the kind of public discussion. We have this controversy, is the death penalty right or wrong? And that's not really the question we're asking here.
Yeah.
It's are we making the right decision in the right cases? And then are these decisions that we're making, is it worth it? When so few actually get there. And I think people will see this and, have a lot more information that no one else has really had to kind of, ask themselves as they evaluate their public officials going forward. So that's, and I also think that hearing from jurors, that's something, and what they went through, and really getting a look at victims' families, kind of getting that comprehensive look.
Yeah, I mean, it's rare to kind of go back to a family, victims' families and talk to them about that whole process, right? Like, usually reporters, won't go back after the trial's over and say, hey, you know what? How did this go for you? What was this process like for you? Did you feel that sense of justice that you wanted? And I think our stories kind of will show that.
I think so too. So just to kind of recap, this series is going to be called Seeking Death. I'm ABC15 Chief Investigator Dave Biscobing. This is ProPublica reporter Nicole Santa Cruz. Our stories will be on abc15.com/seeking death and on ProPublica.org. I hope you'll check them out. We're going to do an initial set of reports, and there'll be likely more to come. So I hope that you enjoyed watching this and you'll keep up to date on our latest work. So thank you for watching this exclusive streaming discussion.